What happens when the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy discover that their greatest enemy isn't technology, superior numbers, or ancient weapons, but the unpredictable spirit of a single human who refuses to bow? Commander Marcus Chen thought he was facing a routine diplomatic mission when his ship was captured by the Galactic Tribunal. He expected negotiations, perhaps imprisonment, maybe even execution. What he didn't expect was to be dragged before beings so ancient and powerful they had shaped the destiny of thousands of worlds for millennia, only to be told he must abandon everything he believed about choice, freedom, and human dignity. The tribunal's demand seemed simple: ensure the survival of humanity by following their genetic mandate. But Marcus knew that some things are worth more than survival. Some principles are worth dying for. And, sometimes, the greatest victory comes not from following orders, but from showing the universe what it truly means to be human. This is the story of how one man's refusal to surrender his humanity sparked a revolution that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization itself. The warning klaxons had been screaming for 3 minutes when Commander Marcus Chen realized his ship wasn't going to make it out of the Kepler system alive. The bridge of the UES Defiant shuddered under another barrage from the alien vessels that had appeared from nowhere, their sleek forms cutting through space like silver daggers through black silk. "Sir, shields are down to 12%, his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, called out over the chaos. Her voice remained steady despite the sparks cascading from her console. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Marcus gripped the armrests of his captain's chair, watching the tactical display show dozens of red contacts surrounding his lone vessel. Each enemy ship was twice the size of his heavy cruiser, and their technology was clearly centuries ahead of anything humanity had developed. The energy signatures alone defied everything he knew about physics. "Any response to our hail attempts?" he asked his communications officer. "Nothing, sir. They're jamming our long-range communications, but they haven't tried to communicate with us either." Marcus had been exploring the Outer Rim territories for the past 6 months, part of humanity's desperate expansion into deep space. Earth's population had reached 15 billion, and the colony ships were humanity's only hope for long-term survival. His mission had been simple: chart safe passage routes and identify potential threats. He'd found both. The ship lurched violently as another energy beam sliced through the port side. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in an eerie red glow as the main power fluctuated. Marcus made a decision he'd hoped never to face. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency evacuation. All personnel to escape pods immediately." "Sir, we can still fight," Lieutenant Morrison protested, her hands already moving to weapons controls. "With what?" Marcus gestured to the tactical display where their weapon systems showed critical damage across the board. "We've done our job. We found them, and now someone needs to get word back to Earth. That someone is you." He turned to address his bridge crew directly. "I'm staying behind to give you time to escape. Set the evacuation pods on automated trajectories back toward Earth. If even one of you makes it home, the fleet will know what's out here." "Captain, you can't," Morrison began, but Marcus cut her off with a sharp gesture. "That's an order, Lieutenant. Now go." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity as his crew abandoned ship. Marcus watched the escape pods launch one by one, tiny dots of hope racing toward the edge of the system. Most were destroyed within minutes by the alien ships, but he saw at least 3 make it to the edge of sensor range. Maybe they would make it home. Maybe humanity would have a chance to prepare. As the last pod disappeared into hyperspace, Marcus found himself alone on the bridge of a dying ship. The Defiant was listing badly now, atmosphere bleeding from dozens of breaches. He sealed the bridge and activated life support backup systems, buying himself perhaps an hour of breathable air. The alien ships had stopped firing. Instead, they formed a perfect circle around his vessel, maintaining distance but clearly preventing any escape. Marcus waited, watching the silent ships and wondering what they wanted. He didn't have to wait long. A new energy signature appeared on his sensors, massive beyond anything he'd seen before. The readings were so intense they overloaded his damaged equipment, leaving him effectively blind. When his vision cleared, he found himself staring at something that challenged his understanding of what was possible. The ship, if it could be called a ship, stretched across space like a small moon. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, while structures that might have been towers or weapons arrays rose and fell in patterns too complex to follow. Energy crackled between spires that reached kilometers into the void, and the whole massive construct pulsed with a light that seemed to exist in colors that had no names. Marcus felt very small suddenly. Earth's entire space fleet could have fit inside one of the smaller protrusions on the alien vessel's hull. A voice filled his mind without passing through his ears, speaking in perfect English despite clearly originating from something utterly inhuman. Commander Marcus Chen of the species known as human. You will surrender your vessel and prepare for transport. Resistance will result in your termination. The voice carried weight beyond mere words, as if each syllable had been crafted by beings who had commanded obedience across the galaxy for eons. Marcus felt his hands shake despite his best efforts to remain calm. "This is Commander Chen of the United Earthship Defiant," he replied aloud, hoping they could hear him. "By what authority do you detain a vessel operating in neutral space?" The laughter that echoed in his mind was like the sound of stars dying. "Authority? We are the Galactic Tribunal, child. We have governed the civilized systems for over 50,000 of your years. Every species that has achieved interstellar travel has appeared before us. Every species has received our judgment. Now it is your turn." The bridge around Marcus began to dissolve. Not violently, not with the harsh light of teleportation technology he was familiar with, but gently, like morning mist fading before the sun. One moment he was sitting in his command chair surrounded by the familiar controls and displays of his ship, and the next he stood in a space so vast his eyes could not find its boundaries. The floor beneath his feet was smooth and dark, like polished obsidian that reflected depths he couldn't fathom. Above him, structures of impossible geometry reached toward a ceiling lost in shadows that seemed to move with purpose. The air itself felt ancient, heavy with the weight of decisions that had shaped the destiny of countless worlds. Before him rose a dais that seemed to be carved from a single crystal formation, its faceted surface catching and amplifying light from sources he couldn't identify. Upon this platform stood 7 beings, each so different from the others that Marcus initially wondered if he was hallucinating from oxygen deprivation. The first appeared almost human, tall and graceful with features that might have been considered beautiful if not for the eyes, swirling vortexes of silver light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The second was composed entirely of energy, a shifting pattern of fire and lightning barely contained within a roughly humanoid outline. The third looked like a tree had learned to walk, its bark like skin scarred with patterns that might have been writing or natural growth, Marcus couldn't tell which. The others defied easy description. One seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting between solid matter and mathematical concepts. Another appeared to be made of living metal that flowed and reformed itself constantly. The sixth was a cloud of crystalline particles that hummed with harmonic frequencies, while the seventh was simply a void in space shaped roughly like a person, darkness so complete it hurt to look at directly. Marcus Chen spoke the human-like being, its voice carrying the weight of authority that came from millennia of command. "I am Executor Zorinth, first voice of the Galactic Tribunal. These are my colleagues who share in the governance of all civilized space." Marcus found his voice despite the overwhelming presence before him. "What do you want with me? With humanity? Want?" The energy being flickered with what might have been amusement. "We want nothing, human. We simply execute the natural order of galactic civilization. Every species must be evaluated, classified, and assigned their role in the greater structure of society." The tree-like entity swayed slightly as it spoke, its voice like wine through ancient forests. "Your species has spread to 17 worlds in the past century. Your technology advances rapidly. Your population grows exponentially. These are signs of a species approaching the threshold of galactic significance. And what does that mean for us?" Marcus asked. Executor Zorinth stepped forward, and Marcus felt the weight of those galaxy-filled eyes settling upon him. "It means you have reached the point where you can no longer be ignored. Your species must be integrated into galactic society according to the protocols established long before your sun began to burn." The metallic being flowed closer, its surface rippling with embedded symbols. "We have observed your people for 300 of your years, Marcus Chen. We have studied your biological patterns, your psychological profiles, your social structures. We have identified both your potential contributions and your inherent dangers. Dangers? Marcus felt anger rising despite the hopelessness of his situation. What dangers? We're barely capable of interstellar travel. We haven't attacked anyone. We're explorers, not conquerors. The void-shaped being spoke, its words seeming to come from empty space itself. Your species exhibits unprecedented levels of individual autonomy. Your genetic diversity is chaotic and unpredictable. Your psychological profiles show alarming tendencies towards self-sacrifice and irrational behavior in defense of abstract concepts. You call freedom and courage abstract concepts? Marcus's voice rose. You call the willingness to die for what's right a flaw? We call it inefficient, Executor Zorinth replied calmly. Order requires predictability. Civilization requires conformity. Your species threatens both. The crystalline entity chimed softly, its particles shifting into new configurations. However, your species also possesses useful traits. Physical resilience beyond the galactic norm. Innovative thinking patterns. High reproductive efficiency. These qualities, properly channeled, could serve the greater good of galactic society. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien atmosphere. What are you saying? Executor Zorinth raised one elegant hand, and the space around them shifted. Suddenly, Marcus found himself looking at holographic displays showing human settlements across the galaxy. He recognized some of the colonies his people had established, but others showed populations far larger than anything humanity had achieved. We are saying that your species will be preserved, Commander Chen. Guided. Directed into channels that serve both your survival and galactic stability. The energy being pulsed brighter. Your genetic material will be systematically distributed among selected breeding populations. Your technological innovations will be incorporated into approved research programs. Your exploratory instincts will be redirected toward service to the greater galactic community. Breeding populations? Marcus felt his stomach drop. You're talking about turning us into livestock. We prefer the term managed reproduction, the tree being said with what might have been a smile if trees could smile. Your species produces exceptional offspring when proper genetic combinations are achieved. These offspring will be raised in controlled environments designed to maximize their potential while minimizing their disruptive tendencies. The metallic entity flowed into a new shape, its surface now showing scrolling lists of data. We have prepared facilities on 17 worlds specifically designed for human habitation. Climate-controlled, resource-rich, with all necessary amenities for a comfortable existence. Your people will want for nothing. Except freedom, Marcus said quietly. Freedom is a luxury civilized societies cannot afford, Executor Zorinth replied. Order serves the greater good. Structure ensures survival. Your species will live, Marcus Chen. They will prosper under our guidance. They will serve purposes greater than any they could achieve through the chaos of independent action. The void being shifted, its darkness seeming to deepen. This brings us to your specific role in this process. Marcus felt the walls of the impossible chamber pressing closer, though nothing had physically changed. My role? You have been selected as the primary breeding male for the initial population groups, the crystalline being announced, its harmonic tones making the words sound almost musical. Your genetic profile, psychological evaluation, and leadership capabilities make you an ideal candidate for producing the first generation of properly managed humans. The energy being flickered excitedly. 27 females have been selected for initial pairing. Each represents optimal genetic compatibility with your biological template. The resulting offspring will form the foundation of humanity's new role in galactic society. Marcus stared at them, his mind reeling. You want me to, what? Be some kind of breeding bull? You will father the next generation of humanity, Executor Zorinth said matter-of-factly. These children will be raised according to approved psychological and social conditioning protocols. They will serve as the template for all future human reproduction programs. And, if I refuse? The tree being's bark patterns shifted into what might have been hieroglyphs or might have been natural scarring. Refusal is not an option we have prepared for, Marcus Chen. The survival of your species depends upon your cooperation. The metallic entity flowed closer, its surface now reflecting Marcus's own image back at him in dozens of fragmented pieces. Your people on Earth, your colonies, your escape pods currently traveling toward home all exist at our discretion. Compliance ensures their continued existence. Resistance ensures their termination. Marcus felt the weight of billions of lives settling on his shoulders. His crew members racing home to warn Earth. The families on dozens of human worlds. Children who would never grow up if he made the wrong choice here. How long? He asked quietly. The initial breeding cycle will require approximately 15 of your years, the crystalline being chimed. During this time, you will live in comfortable quarters with access to recreational activities, educational materials, and regular interaction with your assigned mates. The experience need not be unpleasant. And, after 15 years? Executor Zorantha's galaxy eyes swirled with ancient knowledge. If you prove satisfactory, the program will continue. If not, other genetic templates will be selected and you will be retired to a comfortable life on one of the human preserve worlds. Preserve worlds, Marcus repeated. You mean reservations. Call them what you will, the void being said with finality. They are the future of humanity under tribunal guidance. Orderly. Peaceful. Productive. Marcus looked around the impossible chamber, at being so ancient and powerful they had shaped the galaxy according to their will for 50,000 years. He thought about his crew, about Earth, about the millions of humans who had no idea their entire future was being decided in this moment. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Time is a luxury we cannot afford, Executor Zoranth replied. The breeding populations are already in preparation. The facilities are constructed. The genetic matching protocols have been completed. Your decision must be made now. The energy being pulsed impatiently. Choose, Marcus Chen. Will you serve the greater good and ensure your species' survival? Or will you cling to primitive concepts of individual choice and watch humanity burn? Marcus closed his eyes and thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. His childhood on Earth, growing up in the crowded cities where every day brought new challenges. His service in the Earth Defense Force, learning what it meant to lead people who trusted him with their lives. His years commanding the Defiant, exploring the unknown reaches of space and humanity's desperate search for new homes. All of it had led to this moment. This choice. This test of what it truly meant to be human. When he opened his eyes, the 7 beings of the tribunal were watching him with expressions ranging from patient expectation to cold calculation. Behind them, the chamber walls had become transparent, showing the vast fleet of alien ships waiting in the void. Weapons capable of sterilizing worlds. Technology that could track down every human settlement across the galaxy. Marcus took a deep breath and gave them his answer. No. The word rang out in the impossible space like a bell tolling. For the first time since his capture, the members of the tribunal seemed genuinely surprised. Executor Zoranth leaned forward, galaxy eyes swirling with confusion. No? You refuse the survival of your species? I refuse to trade humanity's soul for its survival, Marcus replied, his voice growing stronger with each word. I refuse to let you turn us into creatures bred for your convenience. I refuse to participate in the destruction of everything that makes us human. The energy being flared brighter, its form crackling with barely contained power. You are willing to let billions die for the sake of abstract principles? I'm willing to let them die as humans rather than live as slaves, Marcus shot back. Some things are worth more than survival. Some things are worth dying for. The tree being's patterns shifted rapidly, displaying what might have been agitation or confusion. This response was not predicted by our analysis models. No rational being chooses extinction over adaptation. Then, maybe your models don't understand what makes humans human, Marcus said. We're not rational. We don't always choose the safe path. We choose the right path, even when it leads to death. The metallic entity flowed into new configurations, its surface showing rapidly scrolling calculations. This changes the parameters of our projections. If humans will choose death over integration, alternative management strategies must be considered. Alternative strategies? Marcus felt ice in his veins. The void being spoke, its darkness seeming to expand. If voluntary compliance cannot be achieved, mandatory compliance protocols exist. Your conscious participation is preferred but not required. Executor Zoranth raised a hand, and the space around them shifted again. Now Marcus could see images that made his blood run cold. Humans in restraints, their eyes blank and staring. Automated facilities where people moved like robots through predetermined routines. Children being raised in clinical environments by machines. Your species will serve its purpose one way or another, Marcus Chen. We had hoped to preserve some measure of individual consciousness during the integration process. Your refusal makes such considerations unnecessary. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, a fire that burned away fear and doubt and left only furious determination. You're not gods. You're not wise guardians of the galaxy. You're just bullies with better technology. We are order, the crystalline being chimed, its particles forming aggressive patterns. We are stability. We are the foundation upon which galactic civilization rests. You're parasites, Marcus snarled. You've been feeding off the creativity and spirit of other species for 50,000 years, breaking them down into manageable pieces that serve your convenience. But you made one mistake. The energy being flickered with what might have been amusement. And what mistake is that, human? Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since his capture, he felt genuinely happy. You assumed that humans would choose survival over freedom. You assumed we'd be reasonable. You assumed we'd bow down to superior force like every other species you've conquered. He spread his arms wide, facing the 7 ancient powers with nothing but defiance in his heart. But we're not like other species. We're humans. And humans don't bow. The chamber began to pulse with energy as the tribunal members exchanged glances filled with calculations and possibilities. Marcus could feel their attention focused on him like the weight of a star, analyzing his words and responses for implications they hadn't considered. Finally, Executor Zoranth spoke, its voice carrying undertones of something that might have been respect. Interesting, Marcus Chen. Very interesting indeed, for the silence that followed Marcus's declaration stretched across the impossible chamber like a held breath. The 7 beings of the tribunal stood motionless, their alien forms frozen in what Marcus could only interpret as shock. For creatures that had commanded the galaxy for 50 millennia, being told no was apparently a novel experience. Executor Zoranth was the first to recover, its galaxy-filled eyes swirling with patterns Marcus couldn't read. You speak of defiance as if it were a virtue, Marcus Chen. But defiance without power is merely suicide. Maybe, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he faced. But it's our choice to make. That's what you don't understand about humans, we'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. The energy being flickered rapidly, its form cycling through colors that had no names in any human language. Fascinating. Our psychological profiles indicated that humans possess strong survival instincts. Your response suggests our data may be incomplete. The tree-like entity swayed, its bark patterns shifting into new configurations that looked almost like writing. Perhaps a demonstration would clarify the situation for our guest. The metallic creature flowed across the platform, its liquid form reshaping itself into a perfect sphere before expanding into a flat surface. The surface began to display images, not holograms, but somehow direct visual input that appeared inside Marcus's mind. He saw Earth as he had never seen it before, viewed from orbit by alien sensors that revealed details no human satellite could capture. The sprawling cities, the orbital stations, the massive arcologies that housed billions of people. It was beautiful and terrifying in its fragility. Your homeworld, the crystalline being chimed, its particles forming geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Population, 15,300,700,000. Strategic military assets, negligible. Defensive capabilities, primitive. The images shifted, showing the human colonies scattered across local space. Marcus recognized New Geneva, with its vast agricultural domes. Kepler Prime, where mining operations extracted rare minerals from asteroid belts. Haven, the research station where humanity's brightest minds worked on breakthrough technologies. 17 established colonies, the void being intoned from its patch of darkness. Combined population, 2,100,000,000. Combined military assets, 12 orbital defense platforms, 37 patrol vessels, 4 heavy cruisers. Marcus felt his heart sinking as he realized the scale of what humanity faced. The alien fleet surrounding his captured ship had been just a tiny fraction of the Tribunal's power. What he was seeing now was a complete military analysis of every human presence in the galaxy. And, here, Executor Zorant said softly, are the results of our projections should you maintain your current course. The images became a nightmare. Earth burning, its atmosphere stripped away by weapons that turned the sky into fire. The colonies reduced to debris fields, their populations simply vanishing as orbital bombardments erased every trace of human presence. The patrol ships that tried to fight were swatted aside like insects. Total estimated time for complete human extinction, 72 hours, the energy being reported with clinical detachment. Casualties, 17,400,000,000 souls. Survivors, 0. Marcus watched his species die in fast forward, seeing everything humanity had built across 3 centuries of space travel reduced to cosmic dust in less than 3 days. The images were so detailed, so realistic, that he could almost feel the heat of burning worlds on his face. This is what your defiance accomplishes, Marcus Chen, the tree being said, its voice like wine through a graveyard. Total extinction in exchange for the preservation of abstract principles that will die with you. The metallic entity reformed itself into a humanoid shape, its surface reflecting Marcus's own horrified expression. Alternatively, compliance with our integration protocols ensures the survival of 97% of your species' current population. Quality of life ratings in our managed populations consistently exceed galactic averages. Quality of life, Marcus repeated numbly, still seeing the images of Earth burning. For slaves. For citizens of galactic civilization, Executor Zorant corrected. Fed, housed, provided with meaningful work, protected from the chaos of unguided development. Your people would know peace, Marcus Chen. True peace, free from the constant struggle and uncertainty that has plagued your species since its emergence. The void being shifted, its darkness seeming to reach toward Marcus like grasping fingers. Consider the mathematics, human. 17 billion lives preserved versus 17 billion lives lost. Even your primitive ethical systems should recognize the calculation. Marcus felt the weight of those billions pressing down on him. Every person on Earth, every colonist struggling to build new lives on distant worlds, every child who would never grow up if he made the wrong choice. The responsibility was crushing, more than any one person should ever have to bear. You're asking me to doom my species to extinction as thinking beings, he said quietly. You want me to trade human souls for human bodies. We want you to be practical, the crystalline being chimed. Consciousness is inefficient. Individual will creates conflict. Guided development eliminates waste and suffering. The energy being pulsed brighter. Observe. The images changed, showing what Marcus assumed were the managed populations the tribunal had mentioned. He saw beings that might once have been human, moving through pristine cities with perfect coordination. Their faces were serene, unmarked by worry or doubt or fear. They worked in harmony, lived in harmony, existed in perfect peace. They also showed no more individual personality than worker ants. The Korthak were once much like your species, Executor Zorant explained, gesturing to the images. Chaotic, individualistic, prone to violence and disorder. Under our guidance, they became the model citizens you see before you. Productive, peaceful, content. Dead inside, Marcus whispered. Evolved beyond the need for destructive emotions, the tree being corrected. They know no hunger, no fear, no loneliness, no doubt. Is this not superior to the constant anxiety that characterizes human existence? Marcus studied the images more carefully. The cities were indeed beautiful, their architecture flowing and organic. The people moved with graceful efficiency, their actions perfectly coordinated. There was no crime, no poverty, no conflict of any kind. There was also no laughter. No spontaneous interaction. No art that wasn't purely functional. No music that served any purpose other than background harmony. No literature, no philosophy, no messy human complications that made life worth living. You've turned them into machines, he said. We've perfected them, the metallic entity replied, its surface rippling with pride. Removed the inefficiencies that cause suffering. Eliminated the chaos that prevents progress. Given them purpose beyond the meaningless struggle for individual achievement. The void being expanded slightly, its darkness becoming more substantial. This is the future we offer humanity, Marcus Chen. Peace. Order. Purpose. An end to the endless cycle of conflict that has defined your species since its beginning. Marcus looked around the chamber at the 7 ancient beings who had shaped the destiny of thousands of worlds. He tried to imagine them as they must have been eons ago, when they first developed the technology to impose their will on others. Had they started with good intentions? Had they genuinely believed they were helping the species they conquered? How many, he asked. How many what? Executor Zorinth replied. How many species have you perfected over the past 50,000 years? The crystalline being's particles shifted into new patterns. 4,736 species have been successfully integrated into galactic civilization under our guidance. All of them like the Korthak? All of them turned into mindless drones? The energy being flickered with what might have been annoyance. Not mindless. Focused. Directed toward purposes greater than individual satisfaction. They serve the common good rather than selfish desires. And, how many species refused your offer? The silence that greeted this question was answer enough. Marcus felt sick as he realized the scope of what he was facing, not just an alien empire, but a galactic genocide machine that had been operating for longer than human civilization had existed. Let me guess, he said bitterly. They all chose extinction over integration. Every single one. Actually, the tree being said, its bark patterns shifting uncomfortably, you are the first to refuse our initial offer. Marcus blinked. What? No species in our recorded history has rejected the survival option when presented with clear alternatives, Executor Zorinth admitted. Your response is unprecedented. The metallic entity flowed into an agitated configuration. Our psychological models predicted 99.7% probability of immediate compliance once the consequences were explained. Your continued resistance falls outside all established behavioral parameters. Marcus felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. You mean every other species just rolled over when you threatened them? They recognized the logic of survival, the void being said defensively. They understood that cooperation served their long-term interests better than futile resistance. They were smart enough to take the deal, the crystalline being added, its harmonic tones carrying undertones of confusion. Your refusal to accept reality does not demonstrate superior intelligence. Marcus started to laugh. It began as a quiet chuckle but quickly built into full-throated laughter that echoed through the impossible chamber. The tribunal members exchanged glances that suggested his reaction was as unexpected as everything else about this encounter. You don't get it, do you? He gasped between fits of laughter. You really don't understand humans at all. Explain, Executor Zorinth commanded, its galaxy eye swirling with what might have been curiosity. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes, still grinning despite the impossible situation. You've spent 50,000 years conquering species that were smart enough to recognize superior force and surrender. You've built your entire empire on the logical behavior of rational beings who understood when they were beaten. The energy being pulsed impatiently. And now you've met humans, Marcus said, his grin widening. We're the species that charges machine gun nests with bayonets. We're the people who stood against overwhelming odds at Thermopylae, who kept fighting in the Alamo even when defeat was certain, who went into space in ships that had less computing power than a modern calculator. The tree being's patterns shifted rapidly. Such behaviors are irrational. They serve no logical purpose. Exactly. Marcus spread his arms wide. We're not rational. We do stupid, impossible, illogical things because they're right, not because they're smart. We're the species that will fight a war we can't win because the alternative is accepting slavery. The metallic entity flowed closer, its surface reflecting dozens of Marcus's defiant expression. Your point? My point is that you finally met a species that won't be broken by threats or bought with promises of survival. You've met humans, and we're going to be the biggest problem you've ever faced. The void being's darkness seemed to deepen. One human against the combined might of galactic civilization? Your confidence is misplaced. Is it? Marcus asked. Because right now, somewhere in deep space, at least 3 of my crew members are racing back to Earth with news of your existence. They're going to tell humanity that we're not alone, and they're going to tell them exactly what you represent. Executor Zorinth leaned forward, its ancient presence suddenly sharp with attention. And what do we represent, Marcus Chen? Everything we've ever fought against, Marcus replied without hesitation. Tyranny. Oppression. The idea that some beings have the right to decide how others should live. You represent every dictator, every conqueror, every empire that thought it could break the human spirit through force. The crystalline being chimed with frequencies that made Marcus's bones ache. Your species will be outnumbered millions to 1. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are laughably inadequate. How can you possibly believe resistance is feasible? Marcus's grin became predatory. Because you've never faced anything like us. Every other species you conquered was logical. They weighed the odds, calculated the costs, and made rational decisions to preserve their lives. But humans don't work that way. He began pacing the small area where he stood, his energy building as he spoke. When you threaten to exterminate humanity, you're not giving us a choice between survival and death. You're giving us a choice between dying as slaves or dying as free beings. And humans will choose freedom every single time. The energy being's form crackled with agitation. Even if that choice leads to the extinction of your entire species? Especially if it leads to the extinction of our entire species, Marcus replied firmly. Because we understand something you obviously don't. Some things are more important than biological survival. Some principles are worth dying for. The tree being swayed more rapidly, its bark patterns cycling through configurations that looked increasingly distressed. This is madness. No rational species chooses extinction over adaptation. Then, it's a good thing humans aren't rational, Marcus said. We're stubborn, idealistic, and too stupid to know when we're beaten. We're the species that will fight until the last human is dead rather than accept the kind of peace you're offering. Executor Zorinth stood silently for a long moment, its galaxy eyes swirling with calculations that spanned eons of experience. When it finally spoke, its voice carried undertones Marcus hadn't heard before, something that might have been uncertainty. Your psychological profile suggests you are not speaking from mere bravado, Marcus Chen. You genuinely believe your species would choose extinction over integration. I don't believe it, Marcus corrected. I know it. Because I know humans. And I know that when you finally attack us, when you send your fleets to burn our worlds and break our will, you're going to discover something that's going to shock the hell out of you. And what is that? The void being asked. Marcus met the gazes of all 7 tribunal members, his expression absolutely serious now. You're going to discover that humans fight harder when we're losing. You're going to learn that every world you burn will just make the survivors more determined to hurt you. You're going to find out that the worse things get, the more dangerous we become. The metallic entity's surface rippled with confused patterns. This contradicts all established psychological models. Decreased probability of survival typically leads to surrender behavior. Not with humans, Marcus said. With humans, it leads to berserker rage. It leads to kamikaze runs and suicide bombs and last stands that become legends. It leads to people who have nothing left to lose deciding they might as well take as many enemies with them as possible. The crystalline being's harmonic tones became discordant. Such behavior is evolutionarily disadvantageous. Species that develop such traits should have eliminated themselves long ago. Marcus laughed again, shorter this time but no less genuine. Should have, yeah. But we didn't. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped us out dozens of times over. And, you know why? Why? Executor Zorinth asked, and Marcus could hear genuine curiosity in the ancient being's voice. Because humans are too stubborn to die quietly. Because when things get really bad, when all hope is lost and defeat is certain, we get angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous force in the universe. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. Marcus could sense the tribunal members communicating among themselves through methods beyond his understanding, sharing data and analyses and projections based on this new information about human psychology. Finally, the energy being spoke, its form dimmer than before. If your species truly prefers extinction to integration, then perhaps termination is the most efficient solution. A quick genocide would prevent the complications you describe. Go ahead, Marcus said, calling their bluff. Kill us all right now. But understand that you'll be doing something you've never done before in 50,000 years of conquest. Which is, the tree being asked. You'll be creating martyrs, Marcus replied. And the one thing you can't control, the one force that even your advanced technology can't stop, is the power of an idea. The idea that some beings chose death over slavery. The idea that somewhere in the galaxy, there was once a species that couldn't be broken. The void being's darkness seemed to waver. Ideas cannot threaten galactic order. Can't they? Marcus challenged. What happens when other species hear about humanity? When they learn that someone finally said no to the mighty tribunal? When they realize that your power isn't absolute, that your control isn't inevitable? Executor Zorinth's galaxy eye swirled faster, patterns shifting in ways that suggested rapid calculation. You believe human resistance would inspire others to rebel. I believe human extinction would inspire others to rebel, Marcus corrected. Because if you kill us all, you'll prove that you're not the benevolent guardians you pretend to be. You'll show the galaxy that you're just another group of tyrants who destroy what they can't control. The metallic entity flowed into new configurations, its surface showing rapidly changing data streams. Rebellion probability calculations are inconclusive. No precedent exists for species-wide martyrdom events. Exactly, Marcus said triumphantly. You've spent 50,000 years building a system based on fear and compliance. You've never had to deal with a species that would rather die than submit. And now you're facing the possibility that our deaths might inspire others to follow our example. The crystalline being's particles formed chaotic patterns that generated harsh, discordant tones. This scenario was not predicted by any of our behavioral models. Because your models are based on rational actors, Marcus explained. They assume everyone wants to survive, that everyone can be bought or intimidated or convinced to compromise their principles. They don't account for humans. He spread his arms wide, encompassing the impossible chamber and the ancient beings who ruled it. So here's your choice, Tribunal. You can try to force humanity into your breeding programs, knowing that we'll resist every step of the way and probably inspire other species to do the same. You can try to exterminate us, knowing that our deaths will make us martyrs and might trigger the first real rebellion you've faced in 50 millennia. Executor Zorinth leaned forward. Or. Marcus smiled, and this time there was no humor in it, only the cold determination of someone who had found something worth dying for. Or you can walk away. Leave humanity alone. Let us develop naturally, without your interference. Let us be the living proof that your system isn't perfect, that some species can't be conquered or controlled or perfected. The silence that followed was the deepest yet. Marcus could feel the weight of 50,000 years of absolute power pressing against the simple concept he had presented, the idea that maybe, just maybe, some things were more important than order. When the energy being finally spoke, its voice was quieter than before. And if we choose the third option? If we simply leave you alone? Then, you prove that your power has limits, Marcus replied. You prove that there are lines even the tribunal won't cross. And, maybe, just maybe, you prove that there's still hope for a galaxy where different species can coexist without one group deciding how all the others should live. The 7 beings of the tribunal stood motionless, considering possibilities they had never imagined in eons of unchallenged rule. And Marcus Chen, one human standing against the accumulated might of galactic civilization, waited to see whether his species would live free or die fighting. The tribunal's deliberation lasted what felt like hours, though Marcus had no way to measure time in the impossible chamber. The 7 beings stood motionless as statues, their forms occasionally flickering or shifting as they communicated through means beyond human comprehension. Marcus waited, trying not to think about the billions of lives hanging in the balance of whatever decision they were making. When Executor Zorinth finally moved, its galaxy-filled eyes had taken on a new pattern, swirling spirals that reminded Marcus of storm systems on a planetary scale. The ancient being stepped forward, and, when it spoke, its voice carried undertones that hadn't been there before. Marcus Chen, it said slowly, you have presented us with scenarios we have not encountered in 50,000 years of galactic governance. Your species' psychological profile creates complications in our established protocols. The energy being flickered back to life, its form brighter and more agitated than before. The probability matrices for human compliance have been recalculated 17 times. All models indicate unacceptable levels of resistance. Unacceptable to whom? Marcus asked. To your efficiency ratings? Or to your consciences? The tree-like entity swayed, its bark patterns shifting into configurations that looked almost like writing. Conscience is a luxury that beings responsible for galactic stability cannot afford, Marcus Chen. We make decisions based on logic, necessity, and the greater good of all species. All species except the ones you lobotomize, Marcus replied sharply. Tell me, what gives you the right to decide how other beings should live? What makes you qualified to determine the fate of entire civilizations? The metallic creature flowed closer, its surface reflecting Marcus's defiant expression in hundreds of fragmented pieces. Experience. Wisdom accumulated over millennia. The perspective that comes from overseeing the rise and fall of countless worlds. Or arrogance, Marcus countered. The arrogance that comes from having absolute power for so long you've forgotten what it's like to be challenged. When was the last time any of you questioned whether what you're doing is right? The void being's darkness seemed to pulse with what might have been emotion. Right and wrong are simplistic concepts, human. We deal in outcomes. Results. The mathematical certainty that order produces better lives than chaos. For who? Marcus demanded. Better lives for the species you've turned into biological robots? Or better lives for you, because you don't have to deal with the messy complications of free will? The crystalline being chimed with discordant harmonies. Freedom is an illusion that causes suffering. Individual choice leads to conflict. Under our guidance, species achieve true contentment. Marcus studied the alien beings arrayed before him, trying to understand minds that had operated according to the same principles for 50 millennia. They genuinely believed they were helping the species they conquered. In their view, eliminating individual will and personal choice was an act of mercy, freeing entire civilizations from the burden of making their own decisions. It was the most terrifying form of tyranny he had ever encountered, oppression that came wrapped in benevolence, slavery that was presented as liberation. You know what I think, he said finally. I think you're afraid. Executor Zorinth's galaxy eyes swirled faster. Afraid? Of what could we possibly be afraid? Of chaos, Marcus replied. Of the unpredictability that comes with freedom. Of the possibility that species allowed to develop naturally might surpass you. You've spent 50,000 years building a galaxy where everything is neat and orderly and under your control, and the thought of giving that up terrifies you. The energy being's form crackled with agitation. We have no need to fear lesser species. Our technological and intellectual superiority is absolute. Is it? Marcus challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like 7 ancient beings who are so scared of losing control that they'd rather commit genocide than allow one species to remain free. The tree being's patterns shifted rapidly, displaying what might have been anger or confusion. Your accusations are illogical. We seek to preserve life, not destroy it. You seek to preserve biology while destroying everything that makes life worth living, Marcus shot back. You're not gods or guardians, you're parasites. You feed off the creativity and innovation of other species while systematically destroying their ability to think for themselves. The metallic entity flowed into an aggressive configuration, its surface rippling with hostile patterns. Your insults accomplish nothing, human. The reality remains unchanged: your species will comply or face extinction. Marcus felt a familiar sensation building in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced during combat, when desperate situations called for desperate measures. It was the moment when conventional tactics failed and only audacious improvisation could save the day. "Actually," he said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his own voice, "I have a counter-proposal." The void being's darkness seemed to deepen with interest. "Explain." Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to gamble the future of humanity on a strategy that was either brilliant or suicidal. "You claim your system is superior because it creates order and prevents conflict. I claim human freedom is superior because it creates innovation and growth. So let's prove it." Executor Zorinth leaned forward. "What do you suggest?" "A test," Marcus said. "Give humanity 1 generation, 50 years, to develop without interference. Don't help us, don't hinder us, just leave us alone. At the end of 50 years, compare what we've accomplished to what your perfected species have achieved in the same timeframe." The crystalline being's particles formed skeptical patterns. "And if your species proves inferior? If chaos and conflict lead to stagnation or self-destruction? Then, you win," Marcus replied. "Humanity accepts integration into your system voluntarily. No resistance, no martyrdom, no inspiration for other species to rebel. We become model citizens of your galactic civilization." The energy being flickered with what might have been amusement. "And if your species somehow surpasses our expectations?" Marcus met its burning gaze without flinching. "Then, you acknowledge that your system isn't perfect. You allow other species the same choice, freedom or integration, with the right to prove themselves worthy of independence." The chamber fell silent as the tribunal considered this unprecedented proposition. Marcus could sense rapid calculations and consultations taking place through channels beyond his understanding. He waited, knowing that everything depended on appealing to whatever remained of their intellectual curiosity after 50,000 years of absolute certainty. Finally, the tree being spoke, its voice like wine through ancient forests. "The risks of such an experiment are considerable. 50 years of unguided human development could produce unpredictable consequences." "Exactly," Marcus said. "That's what makes it a fair test. If your system is truly superior, it should be able to outperform a chaotic species like humanity even when we're given optimal conditions." The metallic entity flowed into new configurations, its surface displaying cascading calculations. "The proposal contains several logical flaws. Comparative development rates depend on numerous variables. Initial technological baselines, resource availability, population dynamics. Then, control for those variables," Marcus suggested. "Give us access to the same basic resources your managed species receive. Establish baseline measurements for comparison. Make it a genuine scientific experiment rather than a foregone conclusion." The void being's darkness pulsed with what might have been consideration. "You assume we have interest in conducting such experiments. Our current system functions optimally. Does it?" Marcus challenged. "When was the last time any of your managed species produced a genuine innovation? When did they last create something beautiful or inspiring or unexpected? Your system produces order, but does it produce growth?" Executor Zorintha's galaxy eye swirled with patterns Marcus had never seen before. "Growth often leads to instability. Innovation can disrupt established order. We have found that controlled development produces more reliable outcomes." "More boring outcomes," Marcus corrected. "You've traded discovery for predictability. You've chosen stagnation over progress. And, deep down, I think part of you knows that's a mistake." The crystalline being chimed with frequencies that made the air itself vibrate. "Your proposal assumes we have something to gain from such an experiment. What would motivate our participation in unnecessary risks?" Marcus smiled, recognizing an opening. "Curiosity. After 50,000 years of managing the same predictable species, aren't you just a little bit interested in seeing what might happen if you let evolution take its natural course?" The energy being's form brightened. "Curiosity is a dangerous indulgence for beings in our position." "Is it? Or is it the thing that drove you to become powerful in the first place? Marcus pressed. You didn't build this galactic civilization by playing it safe. You explored, experimented, took risks. When did you stop being explorers and start being bureaucrats? The tree being's patterns shifted into configurations that looked almost nostalgic. The early epochs required different approaches. Before the establishment of stable governance protocols. Before you got comfortable, Marcus said. Before you decided that maintaining control was more important than discovering what was possible. You've built a galaxy-spanning empire, but when was the last time any of you felt genuinely surprised by something? The metallic entity's surface rippled with what might have been longing. Surprise is inefficient. Unpredictable outcomes complicate long-term planning. But they also make existence interesting, Marcus pointed out. They create moments of wonder and discovery that give meaning to consciousness. When you eliminate surprise, you eliminate one of the fundamental joys of being alive. The void being's darkness seemed to waver. Joy is irrelevant to effective governance. Is it? Marcus asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've created a galaxy where nobody, including yourselves, experiences genuine happiness anymore. You've made existence efficient, but you've also made it empty. The 7 beings of the tribunal stood in contemplative silence, and Marcus could sense something he hadn't expected: uncertainty. These ancient rulers who had shaped the destiny of thousands of worlds were experiencing something they hadn't felt in millennia: doubt about their own infallibility. Executor Zoranth spoke first, its voice carrying undertones of something that might have been weariness. Your proposal is unprecedented. No species has ever suggested voluntary subjugation contingent upon comparative performance. Because no species has ever been confident enough in their potential to make such an offer, Marcus replied. Humans aren't just asking for freedom, we're betting our entire future on our ability to prove that freedom produces better results than control. The energy being flickered thoughtfully. The experimental parameters would need to be carefully defined. Success metrics established. Observation protocols implemented. The crystalline being's particles formed excited patterns. Comparative studies of developmental trajectories under varying governance models could provide valuable data for optimizing future integration procedures. Marcus felt hope building in his chest. They were actually considering it. These beings who had ruled through absolute certainty for 50,000 years were intrigued by the possibility of learning something new. The tree being swayed gently, its bark patterns cycling through configurations that looked almost contemplative. The risks remain significant. Unguided human development could produce technologies or ideologies that threaten galactic stability. Then, monitor us, Marcus suggested. Observe, record, analyze. If we start developing something genuinely dangerous, you can intervene. But, give us the chance to prove what freedom can accomplish. The metallic entity flowed closer, its surface reflecting Marcus's earnest expression. And if humanity fails to meet its own projections? If 50 years of independence produces inferior results to managed development? Then, we accept the consequences, Marcus said firmly. No resistance, no martyrdom, no attempts to inspire rebellion in other species. Humanity integrates willingly into your system and serves as an example of why your approach is correct. The void being's darkness deepened with what might have been approval. A species willing to stake its freedom on its own competence. This proposal contains elements of both logic and audacity. Marcus nodded. It's a human solution to a human problem. We don't want charity or special treatment, we want the chance to succeed or fail on our own merits. Executor Zoranth stepped forward, its ancient presence focused on Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. There would be conditions. Restrictions to prevent genuine threats to galactic security. I'm listening, Marcus said. No development of consciousness transfer technology. No experimentation with dimensional manipulation. No attempts to create artificial intelligences that exceed galactic safety parameters. No expansion beyond your current sphere of influence without prior authorization. Marcus considered the restrictions. They were significant but not crippling. Humanity could still develop advanced technology, explore space, and grow as a civilization within those bounds. Agreed, he said. Anything else? The energy being pulsed brighter. Regular progress reports. Detailed documentation of technological and social developments. Submission to periodic evaluation by tribunal representatives. Fair enough, Marcus replied. We'll be transparent about our progress. The crystalline being chimed with anticipatory harmonics. Most importantly, if the experimental period produces evidence of significant threats to galactic order, the test terminates immediately and standard integration protocols resume. Marcus nodded, understanding the implications. You keep veto power if we become genuinely dangerous. I accept that. The tree being's pattern shifted into configurations that looked almost like approval. The proposal has merit. A controlled experiment in alternative development models could provide valuable insights. The metallic entity flowed into a new configuration, its surface displaying what looked like contract terms. Assuming consensus among the tribunal, implementation could begin immediately. Human colonies would be designated autonomous zones subject to the stated restrictions. The void being's darkness seemed to brighten slightly. One question remains: what assurance do we have that you speak for your entire species? How do we know humanity will honor this agreement? Marcus smiled grimly. Because I'm going to make sure they understand what's at stake. When I return to Earth, I'll explain exactly what this test means and what the consequences of failure would be. Humans might be stubborn and irrational, but we're also capable of keeping our word when the stakes are high enough. Executor Zorantha's galaxy eye swirled with what might have been approval. Very well, Marcus-chan. Your proposal will be put to formal consideration by the full tribunal. The chamber around them began to shift and change, the impossible geometry rearranging itself into new configurations. Marcus felt the weight of what he had just accomplished settling on his shoulders. He had negotiated humanity's freedom, but he had also committed his species to proving themselves worthy of that freedom. How long for a decision? He asked. The tribunal will deliberate according to established protocols, Executor Zoranth replied. You will remain here until consensus is reached. As the ancient beings began to withdraw to whatever processes they used for formal decision-making, Marcus found himself alone in a chamber that had become significantly smaller and more conventionally geometric. He had done everything he could. Now he could only wait and hope that 50,000 years of absolute certainty hadn't completely destroyed the tribunal's capacity for intellectual curiosity. The future of humanity hung in the balance, dependent on whether beings older than civilization itself could still remember what it felt like to wonder about possibilities they had never imagined. Marcus had no way to measure how long the tribunal's deliberations lasted. The chamber they had left him in defied conventional understanding of space and time. Sometimes it felt like a small room, other times it seemed to stretch into infinity. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of the seven ancient beings through what might have been windows or might have been dimensional viewing portals, their forms engaged in communication methods that involved energies and concepts beyond human comprehension. He spent the time thinking about what he had done, questioning every word of his proposal and wondering if he had doomed humanity through overconfidence. The test he had suggested was fair in principle, but it assumed humans would actually be able to outperform species that had been optimized by beings with 50,000 years of experience. What if he was wrong? What if human chaos and individuality really were inferior to tribunal order and control? The worst part was the waiting. Marcus had always been a man of action, someone who preferred to face problems head-on rather than endure uncertainty. But now the future of his species rested on decisions being made by minds that operated on timescales he couldn't imagine, using criteria he couldn't understand. When the chamber suddenly expanded back to its original impossible dimensions, Marcus felt his heart rate spike. The 7 members of the tribunal materialized on their crystal platform, their alien forms somehow more substantial than before. Executor Zoranth stepped forward, its galaxy-filled eyes swirling with patterns that seemed both ancient and newly formed. Marcus-Chen of the human species, the ancient being began, its voice carrying formal weight that echoed through the vast space. The Galactic Tribunal has reached consensus regarding your proposal. Marcus stood straighter, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. I'm listening. Your suggestion of a competitive developmental period represents an unprecedented deviation from established protocols, Executor Zorinth continued. It introduces variables that compromise the predictability we have maintained for 50 millennia of galactic governance. The energy being flickered brighter as it spoke. However, analysis of our current system indicates potential areas for optimization. Comparative data from alternative development models could provide valuable insights for future integration procedures. Marcus felt hope stirring in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. The crystalline being chimed with harmonic frequencies that seemed almost excited. The proposal offers unique research opportunities. No previous studies have examined the long-term outcomes of completely unguided species development under controlled conditions. Therefore, the tree-like entity added, its bark patterns shifting into configurations that might have been satisfaction. The tribunal has voted to approve your experimental period. Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle with relief, but Executor Zorinth's next words reminded him that victory came with conditions. However, the parameters have been modified to address legitimate security concerns and ensure meaningful data collection. The ancient being gestured, and the space around them filled with holographic displays showing detailed specifications. The experimental period will span 50 Earth years, as you suggested, the void being announced from its patch of darkness. During this time, humanity will be granted autonomous development rights within a specified sphere of influence. Marcus studied the displayed boundaries. They encompassed all current human colonies plus room for reasonable expansion, not unlimited growth, but enough space for his species to truly test their potential. Your technological development will be unrestricted except for the prohibited areas we specified, the metallic entity explained, its surface flowing with approval. No consciousness transfer, no dimensional manipulation, no dangerous artificial intelligence research, no expansion beyond designated boundaries. Understood, Marcus nodded. What about observation and evaluation procedures? Executor Zorinth's expression, insofar as its alien features could be read, seemed almost anticipatory. Tribunal observers will be stationed throughout human space. Not to interfere, but to document and analyze your progress according to established metrics. The energy being pulsed brighter. These observers will be disguised using technology that will render them undetectable to human senses. They will study your social development, technological innovation, cultural evolution, and overall species advancement. Marcus felt a slight chill. Spies, then. Researchers, the crystalline being corrected, its particles forming defensive patterns. Their presence will not affect human development in any measurable way. They will simply record what occurs naturally. The tree being swayed gently. At the end of the 50-year period, tribunal representatives will conduct a formal evaluation comparing human achievements to those of managed species during equivalent developmental periods. And, if we succeed? Marcus asked. If we prove that freedom produces better results than control? The void being's darkness seemed to brighten. Then, the tribunal will consider extending similar autonomous rights to other species, contingent upon their demonstrated ability to handle independence responsibly. If we fail? Executor Zorinth's galaxy eyes swirled with inexorable certainty. Then, humanity accepts integration into galactic civilization according to standard protocols. No resistance, no martyrdom, no attempts to inspire rebellion among other species. Marcus nodded. Agreed. When does the test begin? It has already begun, the metallic entity replied, its surface rippling with what might have been amusement. From the moment of this decision, humanity enters its probationary period. You will be returned to human space to inform your people of what has transpired. The chamber began to shift around them, but Executor Zorinth raised a hand to pause the process. One final matter requires clarification, Marcus Chen. Your role in this experiment. Marcus felt tension building in his shoulders. What do you mean? You have negotiated this arrangement on behalf of your entire species, the ancient being explained. The question remains, how will you ensure human compliance with the agreed terms? The weight of the question settled on Marcus like a physical force. How could he guarantee that billions of humans across dozens of worlds would honor an agreement they hadn't participated in making? How could he ensure that human governments and military leaders would accept restrictions negotiated by one ship captain? "I'll tell them the truth," he said finally. "I'll explain what the alternative was, and what this opportunity represents. Humans might be stubborn, but we're not stupid. When they understand what's at stake, they'll honor the agreement." The energy being flickered skeptically. "And if some refuse? If human factions reject the experimental parameters or attempt to exceed the agreed boundaries?" Marcus felt the trap closing around him. Of course there would be humans who rejected any deal with aliens, regardless of the consequences. Of course there would be extremist groups who would see alien monitoring as an intolerable violation of human sovereignty. Of course there would be military leaders who would want to test the boundaries of what was permitted. "Then, I'll stop them," he said quietly. The crystalline being's particles formed questioning patterns. "Explain." Marcus took a deep breath, understanding what he was committing himself to. "I'll accept appointment as the tribunal's liaison with humanity. Any violations of the experimental parameters will be reported to me, and I'll take responsibility for correcting them." By any means necessary, the tree being asked, its bark patterns shifting into configurations that looked almost sympathetic. By any means necessary, Marcus confirmed, though the words tasted like ashes in his mouth. He was agreeing to become humanity's warden, the enforcer who would ensure his own species remained within acceptable bounds. The void being's darkness pulsed with what might have been approval. Such a role would require significant authority within human governmental structures. "I'll figure it out," Marcus said. "Humans respond to clear explanations of cause and effect. When they understand that stepping out of line means extinction for the entire species, most will choose compliance." "Most," Executor Zorinth repeated. "But not all." "Not all," Marcus admitted. "But I'll deal with the exceptions." The ancient being studied him with galaxy-filled eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "You understand that this role will make you responsible for potentially violent enforcement actions against your own people?" Marcus felt something breaking inside his chest, the idealistic belief that he could save humanity without compromising his own humanity in the process. "I understand. You understand that some humans will see you as a collaborator? A traitor who sold out his species to alien masters? I understand. You understand that this position will likely require you to sacrifice personal relationships, family connections, and the respect of those you seek to protect?" Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about his crew, his friends, the life he had lived before this moment. All of it would change now. He would become the human who enforced alien rules, the defender who had to attack his own people to protect them from themselves. "I understand." When he opened his eyes, Executor Zorinth had moved closer, its presence overwhelming in its ancient authority. "Why, Marcus Chin? Why accept such a burden when you could simply return to Earth and let others worry about the consequences?" The question hung in the impossible space between them, and Marcus realized it was the most important one he had ever been asked. Why was he willing to sacrifice his own happiness, his own moral clarity, his own peace of mind for the sake of humanity's freedom? "Because someone has to," he said simply. "Because the alternative is worse. Because sometimes the right choice is also the hardest choice, and someone has to be willing to make it." The energy being pulsed with what might have been respect. "Even if that choice destroys you personally?" Marcus thought about the years ahead, the decisions he would have to make, the orders he would have to give, the hatred he would have to endure from the very people he was trying to protect. He thought about becoming the kind of person he had always despised, someone who enforced compliance through authority and threat. "Even then," he said. "Because humanity's freedom is worth more than my personal comfort." The crystalline being chimed with frequencies that sounded almost like mourning. "You will become something your species has rarely seen, Marcus Chen, a tyrant in service of liberation. A dictator whose ultimate goal is to preserve the right of others to reject dictatorship." "I know," Marcus replied. "And I'll hate myself for it. But I'll do it anyway, because the only thing worse than becoming a monster would be letting my species become slaves." The tree being's patterns shifted into configurations that looked like ancient sadness. "The irony is profound. To save humanity's freedom, you must surrender your own. To preserve their right to choose, you must accept the burden of making choices they cannot be trusted to make. Marcus nodded. That's the price of this deal. I'll pay it. The Void Being's darkness seemed to deepen with something that might have been sympathy. The isolation will be complete, Marcus Chen. You will stand between two worlds, human and alien, belonging fully to neither. Your own people will fear and hate you. The tribunal will see you as a useful tool. You will be truly alone. Then, I'll be alone, Marcus said with finality. But, humanity will be free. Executor Zorinth stepped back, its galaxy eye swirling with patterns that conveyed something Marcus couldn't quite identify: respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred burden. The terms are acceptable. Marcus Chen, by the authority of the Galactic Tribunal, you are hereby appointed as Human Oversight Coordinator for the duration of the experimental period. The chamber began to dissolve around them, reality shifting in ways that defy description. As the familiar sensation of transportation took hold, Marcus heard Executor Zorinth's final words echoing in his mind. Remember, Marcus Chen, you have saved your species by agreeing to damn yourself. See that you do not forget which sacrifice serves the greater good. Then, the impossible space was gone, and Marcus found himself standing on the bridge of a ship he didn't recognize, surrounded by technology that clearly wasn't human. Through the viewports, he could see Earth growing larger as the vessel approached home. He was going back to deliver the news that would change everything, that humanity had been given a chance to prove themselves worthy of freedom, and that he would be the one to ensure they didn't waste that chance. The hardest part of his mission was just beginning. 6 months after his return to Earth, Marcus Chen stood before the assembled leaders of the United Earth government, watching their faces as he delivered his monthly report on humanity's progress under tribunal observation. The magnificent chamber of the Global Assembly had been his second home for half a year, its soaring architecture and symbolic decorations a constant reminder of human achievement and aspiration. Now it felt like a prison. Population growth remains within acceptable parameters, he reported, reading from notes that contained information no human government had generated. Technological development in approved sectors shows marked advancement. Colonial expansion has been limited to designated zones as agreed. President Sarah Martinez leaned forward in her seat, her expression carefully neutral. And the observers? Remain undetected by our general population, Marcus confirmed. They've made no attempt to interfere with human activities beyond their surveillance mandate. General Harrison of the Earth Defense Force shifted uncomfortably. Commander Chen, we're still receiving requests from the Outer Rim colonies for permission to expand beyond the designated boundaries. The populations are growing faster than expected, and resources are becoming strained. Marcus felt the familiar weight of his position settling on his shoulders. Denied. The boundaries are non-negotiable. But surely we can negotiate some flexibility, Dr. Elizabeth Foster from the Science Council began. There is no flexibility, Marcus interrupted, his voice harder than he intended. The terms of our agreement are absolute. Any violation, any expansion beyond the designated zones, any research into prohibited areas, any of it, and the test ends immediately. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken resentment. These were good people, leaders who genuinely cared about humanity's future, and they were struggling to understand why their own representatives seemed so inflexible, so willing to enforce alien restrictions. If only they knew what he knew. If only they could see the data the tribunal shared with him daily, the comparison charts showing human progress against the perfected species they were competing with. If only they understood how narrow their margin for error really was. The latest reports from our deep space monitoring stations, Admiral Reyes said carefully, indicate unusual energy signatures in several border regions. Nothing that poses an immediate threat, but those are tribunal observer posts, Marcus said bluntly. They're monitoring our compliance with the agreement. Don't approach them, don't investigate them, don't acknowledge their existence in any official capacity. President Martinez stood, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. Marcus, I need to understand something. Are you our representative to the